These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast.
I'm still eating it.
You've got canned meat from 20 years ago? Yeah.
It lasts.
Yeah.
As long as the seal's good.
Uh-huh.
I don't do that intentionally, but I did so much hunting and fishing in Alaska. I got halibut and salmon and bear, a little bit of buffalo that friends gave me, elk and deer. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Dale Story, what year were you born?
1942.
1942.
I hesitated because I was getting ready for a joke.
No, there's no joke. You're always cautious that I'm trying to tease you, but I'm not.
No, I always tell everybody 1842, and some of them just go right by. It goes over their head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was guiding this trip of high school seniors, and they'd graduated from a fancy private school back east, and we were going down the Salmon River, I believe. And one of these kids asked me if I'd fought in the War of 1980. And I really didn't know what to make by that. I was born in 1986.
Yeah.
There is no War of 1980.
Yeah.
I was just, there were so many levels there that I was like, I don't know what to do with
And
this.
he couldn't be talking about 1812.
No. She just probably didn't pay that close of attention in school. So 1942, where were you born?
Oh, gosh. If I tell you that, you'll stop this interview.
Does it start with a C and end in California?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But you have no choice where you're born.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Don't get to pick that or your family.
I got the heck out of there as quick as I could. I left there when I was 18. But as a matter of fact, I was going to run away from home. I was a sophomore. And I was so disgruntled. I was raised by a wonderful mother, but I had no father. He was an alcoholic and not a good person at all. So he was out of the life at 5 years old. He didn't die. He just was not there. And I was going to run away from home. I had 1,000 rounds of 22 shells, rifle. I had everything figured out. I was going to move at night, going to move up the east side of the Sierra Nevadas. I was going to Alaska.
Mm-hmm. And how old are you at this time?
16.
16, all right.
Well, actually, yeah, close to 16. And I was in to see a counselor for whatever reason, I don't know. And I went to Orange High School in California. And I sat there and I listened to him, and he said, Dale, he says, you've got a great track career ahead of you. And I went home that night, and I really did. I said, okay, I knew this much when I was 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm 16, and I know more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I extrapolated. He's 50-some years old, so he's got to know a hell of a lot more than I do. So I thought, maybe he's right. So I put the rifle up, put the ammunition, stayed with track, bit the bullet. I wasn't a good student.
What track events were you involved in at that time?
Mile. I ran cross country in the mile.
Okay.
And I would drop down my senior year, and I ran everything I could because we had a lot of track meets. 23 track meets my senior year.
So how fast was a mile being run in 1958?
The Dyrol Burleson from Oregon, Cottage Grove, Oregon, set the national record at 4:13.2. And I looked at that in a paper when I was a sophomore, and I thought, that's impossible. Then things went along, and in February of my senior year, I ran 4:19.8. I broke the state record in a relay, but it was easy. And I went home that night, put my black shorts on, ran in the hills, and I thought, I can do it.
You ran 4:19 in high school?
No, I ran. That was the beginning of the year. That was in February.
Okay.
This is not the metric mile. This is the regular mile.
Okay.
1,600 meters.
Okay.
I went home and at that point, then I believed that I could do it.
Yeah.
And then it was a progression all the way through. And in May, I ran 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And set the national record. So I beat Dyrol Burleson's record by 2.2 seconds. And that was just kind of
And how old were you at that time?
17 years and 3 months.
17 years
Yeah.
old, you set a national record
Yeah.
in the mile.
Yeah. And I had polio when I was 11 years old.
Really?
I was paralyzed from the neck down.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Vividly.
What do you remember about it?
Scared to death.
Yeah.
I got real delirious during the night, and I felt like I was moving all over the ceiling and up the walls, and I was, having hallucinations. I staggered out in the room, and I said, "Get me off the roller coaster." I was not a roller coaster, but in my brain I was. Next day, the doctor comes out, checks my reflexes, take me to the hospital, stick the needle in, got polio. But I had the temporary paralysis.
Okay.
So I was about 8 months paralyzed from the neck down. I couldn't move my arms or my legs, and that was scary.
Wow. And then how do you remember what it was like when you started to regain feeling?
Yeah, I remember how much I loved my mother, because she would roll me out of the bed, put me on a carpet, and drag me down the floor to the bathtub, and then put me in a warm bathtub and exercise my muscles to try to alleviate atrophy. And you in a bathtub, you could slide down and drown.
Sure.
And I always thought, oh man, I could drown here because I don't have any control at all.
Yeah.
And so that's where I thought, man, I appreciate my mother, love me. So yeah, that was scary. And it was a gradual deal. And I got real excited when I could start moving some things, but it was a real slow progress. And then I couldn't do any athletic events I couldn't do PE or nothing for 2 years.
Really?
Medical.
Okay.
Medical people.
So now you're 13 or 14 years old?
Yeah.
Before you can even start exercising. And
well, I mean, I could walk and everything, but
Right.
I couldn't do organized sports.
Okay.
And then I went out for cross country my freshman year.
Okay.
And he had a race at the beginning of the season to see where his kids were.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a very good coach. I'll tell you why. And he looked at me, and I was 5'2", 89 pounds. That's pretty wimpy.
Yeah. You're a little guy.
And he looked at me and he says, "You're too little." And I asked him again, "Mr. Slick, let me run." He says, "You're too little." 3 times. I was getting pretty pissed, but I was also hurt, Finally, he relinquished, let me run. And it was a school of 2,000 kids, and I beat all the runners except one senior.
Then what did the coach think?
He never, in all the years I knew him, he never did apologize. Never.
Would it have changed anything?
Well, it would have made me feel like he was a little bit mature.
Yeah.
I showed him, but I lost respect for him.
Yeah.
I didn't have any respect, But in a way, it was a good lesson, because when I got into coaching, and this all happened accidentally, I remember never to tell a kid, "You can't do this." Never to judge him. You want to judge somebody. And I figured, well, if he wants to be a shot putter and he can't lift the shot put, he'll figure it out.
Well, let me ask you this. Yeah. Do you think you ran faster because he told you that you couldn't do it?
Oh, in the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was, number one, with the good help from above, I got over that polio, and I was lucky to have the temporary paralysis. So I was kind of dedicated to getting around.
Yeah.
I didn't give up too easy. And that transferred into my athleticism. And I was a little guy with what I would call a little man complex. So, you're pretty buffy. I see your muscles, so I thought, I want to be like that. I want to be strong, fast, So that motivated me through the years. And it was, I'm glad I listened to that counselor.
Yeah.
But I was also really immature because I never went back and thanked him. I should have went back and said, "Hey, Mr. Patterson, I should have said thank you for guiding me in the right direction." I never did do that. I wasn't mature enough. But
well, you said that you weren't a very good student. I wasn't either. And I think that school isn't for everybody. Like the way it's structured, there's some kids there who are smart and who are capable, and it's just not the right environment for them to do well in. And that was the situation that I was in.
Is that right?
I have since gone back and apologized to every single one of my teachers.
Oh, good for you.
Sorry for how I was. Thank you for not killing me. I would have understood if you did. I had good teachers. I had great teachers. I had bad teachers.
Yeah.
You learn something from all of them,
Yeah.
right? You learn something from all of them. Okay,
Well,
so
you were more mature than I was because
Well,
you went back and thanked them.
it took a while.
Yeah.
It took a while. Yeah, it took a little while. All right, so you're the fastest guy in the whole damn country by 17, and then what happens?
Well, I went to 1 year at junior college in California because I came out of high school with C- average. And I thought, well, I got to get my grades up.
Yep.
Plus, I had a scholarship to a number of colleges, but I said I'm going in fish and game, which limited the number of colleges. There was only a handful. So I wanted to go run for University of Oregon, Bill Bowerman.
Yeah. I bet everybody did.
Yeah,
right?
back in those days. But I couldn't because they didn't have fish and game. But just up the road was Corvallis that had fish and game, and it so happened that the coach there was the coach of Dyrell Burleson that had the record that I broke.
Yep.
From Cottage Grove. And Burleson went to University of Oregon.
And Oregon is about speed.
Yeah.
We're the runningest state that there is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Tremendous reputation. Well, anyway, so I could only run 1 year at junior college in Santa Ana Junior College, which was right next to my home. And I really wanted to run for Big John Ward, who was my surrogate, I think that's the right word, father.
Mm-hmm.
He was just an outdoorsman, brown, tough guy, but he cared about me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a senior in high school, he says, "Hey Dale, you want to go fishing?"
Yes is the answer. Yeah.
Because I was really outdoors. And so we fished at a local lake that Irvine Company owned up there by the Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
Yeah, right close to it. And I mean, he was my father, and he just taught me something. But I could only run there 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And I won the junior college cross-country championships. And then I won the 2 mile at the state meet in for junior college. And then I came to Oregon State and ran there for a number of years. And then...
and how did you do in college?
Well, fair to middling. I was hard on myself.
Feels like an understatement.
Well, I had a real difficulty. I love the outdoors so much, the wilderness, and I would go on canoe trips up into Canada, and I just was in love with that. But I saw the wilderness getting inundated by people, roads, etc. So I thought the wilderness is going. So I want to get experience in the wilderness before. But on the other hand, here was track pulling me from the other direction, saying, you might want to try to see what you can do in the, maybe the Olympics. At one time I had the fastest time in the United States in the 5,000 meters, and I felt pretty confident in that one.
And what year are we now?
1962, 63, 64.
This is before Prefontaine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there was that tug of war. Well, my enthusiasm began to wane a bit. And I got to tell you a bad one. I shouldn't even admit this, but it's the truth. I like to tell the truth. I was back at the AAU championships in Philadelphia, and I had the fastest time in the 5,000 meters. And they took the top 2 people, and they ran in the U.S.-Russian team against the Russians. And then the next 4 places ran on the European tour. And I purposely threw the race.
You did?
Yep.
How come?
Because the next trip was in New York. I didn't want to go to New York. I wanted to go to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to make it look like it was real, but everybody knew it wasn't, particularly my coach, because I would always be in the attack mode, and I had a strong last lap, really strong, and I ended up just behind the qualifying people, and he didn't say a word to me, gave me the airplane ticket. I got on the airplane, flew up to Oregon, and went to Canada.
And were you going up there fishing, or what were you doing?
Kayaking.
Yeah.
Kayaking in the wilderness, and my buddies, and and hunting and fishing. Well, hunting just with a small rifle for rabbits.
Sure. Just some camp meat.
Yeah, exactly. And that haunted me for years.
Does it still?
No, because I didn't make a decision. I didn't make a bad decision purposely. I made a bad decision because of the information I had at the time. Mm-hmm. Number one, the wilderness was not disappearing that fast.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that.
Right.
And when I was about 35, I thought, well, could I have made it to the Olympics? I don't know. Who knows? But it was, yeah. And a lot of people were puzzled because they thought, how in the world can you let that slip through your fingers?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they weren't walking in my shoes.
Yeah.
Well,
your perspective on time and scarcity is so different when you're in college.
Yeah.
I was talking to a young fellow the other day who was looking at a 6-year-long military contract, mm-hmm. and he didn't know if he should do it. It felt like a huge commitment, and at this point, that's more than 25% of his life.
Yeah, yeah.
So it does feel like a lot. It feels like a lifetime.
Plus, he's in the danger zone.
Right, but as you get on in years, you can look back and be like, 6 years. That's not a lot.
Oh yeah.
But what you do with it can really matter. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I understand where you're coming from.
Well, I'm sure. Oh, go ahead.
What was like your crowning achievement, do you feel like, in track and in racing?
Well, I won the NCAA championship in East Lansing, Michigan, barefooted, back in November of 1960. I want to say 2, but I think it's 63.
Why did you run barefoot?
When I was a little kid, I always liked to run around half naked, and I ran barefooted.
Yeah.
And then when I got into the track arena, spikes seemed to be extra weight. Mm-hmm. And so my theory was, and back in those days, they didn't have the real lightweight shoes. I wouldn't wear shoes because I'd be lighter. Well, that worked fine for a while. But then when I got faster, I started to slip on the tracks.
Okay.
And so at that point, I graduated to shoes because I had to have some traction.
Yep.
And so my senior year, running 400, 800, 1320 and mile, I ran with spikes.
What do you remember about that barefoot race?
Oh, you mean the national championships?
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, I was excited.
Yeah.
I didn't go back there thinking I could win it, and I was going to run as hard as I could. But these were the best guys in the United States. I didn't know anything about those guys from the East.
Were they all wearing shoes?
Oh, yeah. I was the only one barefooted. And there was, I think, 5 Olympians there from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, ex-athletes. Athletes. And so, anyway, but I was running, and it was 134 guys, and we went through a gate. And you had to get through that gate. It was 2 posts, about 500 yards out, and you had to run really fast to get ahead of the crowd. I did not like to be caught in the crowd, so I was in 5th spot going through there.
So how wide is this gate?
Oh, 15, 20 feet apart.
Okay, so that's a pretty narrow choke point for...
Yeah, that's exactly a good word, choke point.
134
I didn't
guys.
want to run that fast at the start, but I had no choice.
Yeah.
And so I just tried to relax and gather myself up. So I stayed in the top 5. And then about halfway through, I started taking command. And then pretty soon, a guy from Finland, Matti, Matti, came up on me. And we looked at each other and we talked for a second. And I said, well, we work together. Yeah, we work together.
Yeah.
And he was a real nice kid. I thought, okay, that's great. So we did for a while, and then I thought, this isn't going to work forever.
Yeah.
Because I want to win this race. And he and I were in first and second, and we had built a nice little lead. But we came to a little rise, and I was always pretty strong on the hills.
Yeah.
That was my strong point. And when I hit that hill, it really wasn't a hill compared to Oregon standards.
Right.
But it was something that slowed everybody down a little bit. I hit that baby as hard as I could, and then as soon as I got to the top, when nobody could see me, shoom, down the other side so I could stretch the lead. And I won by, I don't remember how far I won, but it was significant. But anyway, that was a pretty thrilling experience.
That's incredible.
And then I won the...
Did other people start running barefoot after they saw you do that?
Oh, yeah, you find a few of them.
Yeah.
You know, kids are always wanting to emulate somebody else, but I couldn't give you the number or anything like that.
Have you ever come across the book Born to Run?
Yes.
Did you read that?
I read it.
So I read that in 2009, and that's when I was getting ready to go into the Marine Corps. And I was running a heck of a lot at that time, almost exclusively in the Eagle Caps.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I was guiding whitewater, and we'd row boats all day. We'd be out there, 3 to 5 days on these whitewater trips. We'd row all day long, cook dinner for the clients, put them to bed, and then I'd run up to the top of the canyon, whether we were in the salmon or the snake or whatever. Usually get back 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Sleep for a couple hours, wake up, make coffee, do it again. And I was really trying to lose weight for the Marine Corps and get in really good shape. And I wanted to perform well athletically because I knew that the guys that I was going up against in officer candidate school
they were going to be top notch.
Well, they're mostly like Ivy League guys, They're from these big name universities. I'd gone to the University of Montana Western. There's 5,000 people in town. And I spent a lot of time fly fishing. So I thought academically, I'm not going to be able to compete. So I need to be able to do it with athletics, with leadership, with things like that. So I was going as hard as I could, and I read this book, Born to Run, and I'm learning about all this barefoot running stuff, and I got the dorky Vibram, barefoot shoes, and my dad said, you need to talk to Dale Story. He used to run barefoot. And that's when I called you. Of course, this is a long time ago now. And you said, is this a prank call? I was like, no, I'm serious. I want to talk to you about barefoot running. And, you gave me some tips on it, on kind of how to harden my feet up. And the best advice for fitness, for military fitness that I ever got, was from a special forces guy, and he said, get your feet hard and be good with your own body weight. It wasn't anything about your ability to lift weights or carry stuff, but whatever direction it was, you needed to be good with however much you weighed, and your feet needed to be rock hard.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, the best way to do that is to put them in the rocks. I've got to be barefoot. And this thing has continued for me, and it's kind of come full circle now. I spent a month hunting in Australia last fall, and I was barefoot for most of that because that's how those guys hunt down there in the Northern Territories. There's no thorns, which is really nice.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So spent a lot of time hunting barefoot down there, and these shoes I'm wearing now are quote unquote barefoot hunting shoes, and that's what I'm going to be wearing in Africa. And there's nothing quieter. There's nothing quieter, but you've got to ease into it. If you're used to wearing boots, you can't just start out going barefoot and think it's going to be okay. It's not. But anyways, that's kind of the full circle thing with you and me on that. And I don't know if you remember that conversation or not.
I do remember, but I can't connect it to your name.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
And I don't have dementia.
Yeah.
At least if I do, I don't know it.
Well, you've just talked to too many people. I mean, every student remembers their teacher, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard for teachers to remember their students.
And I didn't see you at the time.
Right.
If I could have seen your face, it would have been a little bit better contact.
Yeah, I looked a little bit different.
But I apologize for not.
No worries.
But the.
So, I mean, and my understanding is that was the first NCAA National Championship for the university?
No, for Oregon State.
For Oregon State, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was a university, but
I
wasn't sure if you were talking about University of Oregon.
No, I would never.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when I let's see, when you ask about highlights, I won the Modesto relays at Oregon State in the 2 mile, and I ran 8:46 when I was under 20, 19 years old. And that set the world's record for a junior.
Yeah.
A junior is anybody under 20.
Yeah.
And set the world's record. And it was one of those nights where everything clicked.
Yep.
Everything clicked. I didn't realize I was going to. I just was in the money, and then all of a sudden it was a night meet with thousands of people in the stands, and Modesto was a fantastic place to run. And
I love running at night.
oh, I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. And I literally ran the last 220 yards in 25.7.
Wow.
I was on fire.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get tired.
Yeah.
And I mean, my buddy clocked me, so I know it was legitimate. But it was it had to be one of those days where everything clicked.
Yeah.
And an athlete doesn't get those all the time. And that was a thrilling moment there.
What were you doing as far as nutrition at that time? Were you thinking that much about food?
No, I didn't. All I did was eat and run.
Yeah.
And I ate a lot of junk food. Not junk food, but a lot of meat.
Yeah.
I didn't pay any attention to anything like that. And I didn't weight train. I just did push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups.
And ran. As fast as you could.
I didn't like weight rooms.
Yeah.
They were boring to me.
Yeah.
But I would do, try to do 100 pull-ups, in sets of 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then rest a little second and not straight all the way through. And then, that was upper body strength. But I probably, I don't know if what weights would have been. They just weren't exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't do it. Never did. I didn't do it in college either.
Yeah.
And that's totally different today.
For me, lifting weights is like drinking water. I have to make myself do it.
Do you?
Yeah.
Do you?
But there's so much research now that just says that resistance training is good for your bones and helps you live longer and stuff like that. So I do it. But more than anything, I just hike around and do my job and hunt. And,
how old are you?
I'm 38.
38. Wow.
Yeah.
You're in great shape for 38. I hope the only thing that I don't know is I have some arthritis.
Yeah.
I get around.
Yeah.
But I often wonder, well, at 83, most people are going to get arthritis. But I wonder, well, is my arthritis worse because of running?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that.
And you warned me of that 16 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it's definitely something that I think about. I don't know. I think it's important to move and you definitely got to protect your body when you can. But I've got to move around to be happy. I need to be outside and I need to see new places. And I'm real amphibious in my approach to the outdoors. So I spend a lot of time spearfishing, which is my favorite form of hunting.
Is it?
And I'm guiding elk hunts and different kind of hunts in the fall, and then I get to hunt professionally and travel and stuff like that throughout the rest of the year. And I mean it's a great life. I'm incredibly grateful and lucky for. Especially, just being a Wallowa County kid growing up on a ranch. This is nuts. This is what I wanted to do when I was a little kid, but it didn't exist then. I just got lucky to be in a time where it could happen.
Well, it's good you grabbed a hold of it because you seem really happy with that. And
it beats hollering at cows,
Yeah. That's why I liked working at Wallowa so much.
Yeah.
I was just, I graduated in fish and game management.
Okay.
And then I was... do you know the quarterback, number 10, Justin Herbert?
No.
He's the Los Angeles Chargers quarterback.
Okay.
And he graduated from Sheldon High School. He's my best buddy's grandson.
Okay.
And so I've known him and his two brothers since they were born.
Okay.
And my buddy, their grandfather, Roger Herbert, was teaching school at, he was doing his school teaching. And we were having a taco dinner, and we stood outside, and he showed me a paper, and he says, "What do you think about this kid?" He was doing a student teaching at Corvallis. And I read the paper, and it was a one-page paper. And he says, "I don't know whether to pass the guy or not." We started talking, and as soon as I started seeing reflections of myself. He wasn't a good student, probably from a broken family. And I just thought, a light went on. I could be a teacher. So I immediately went back, 5 more quarters, got my teaching degree, came to Wallowa, stayed there for 30 years.
So that was your first job out of college, was teaching in Wallowa?
Yep. And I loved it.
You have a great reputation with your students. And in fact, it was one of your students who reached out to me and said, "Hey, you need to get Dale on the podcast." And I was like, done. What's his phone number? And then he sent me all these articles and stuff. And I was like, I know a little bit. Like, I'm in. Like, I just need to get a hold of the guy and figure out when to do this. So,
Well, I had to pay him $100 to do that. You
okay,
know?
all right. Well,
Well,
money well spent, I hope.
I do feel pretty fortunate because I like to brag about this. I've got 9 of those kids that I run around with as much as you can. That I've fished in Alaska. Rory fished in Yakutat with me, and Steve Goss and Wayne Tuvey, and Wayne Tuvey there in Wallowa twice. But and 4 of those guys are in my will,
Nice.
and 2 of them are my executors.
Nice.
But that's how the job at Wallowa was the most fantastic thing that happened to me, because it was a chance for me to connect with those kids. And I tell you, James, they were like my kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the relationship is just so strong. I mean, either one of those guys, if I said I need $10,000, I could do a handshake. They give me the money, no contract. I'm quite sure of that.
Sure.
I would do the same thing to them.
Yeah.
And they know it.
Well, how did teaching change in the 30 plus years that you did it?
Oh, well, like anything, nothing stays the same. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line, we lost discipline. We lost respect.
Like the way students respect the teachers?
Yeah, I remember. Oh, yeah, I didn't. I remember one time that Leroy Childers was the superintendent, and he was a stout lad and big guy, and I mean, he was next to God, to me. And his son spit on the floor outside in the upstairs, and he was a tall kid, about 6'4". I went up to him and I said, "Tom, here's a brush, here's some water. You're going to scrub that floor. You don't spit in my building or your building." And he never said a word because his dad would have creamed him.
Yeah.
He got down and scrubbed the floor. If you tried that today, kid would take and jam that toothbrush or brush down your throat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I saw that
right.
happen later on.
Right.
And, it's a shame, but I can't tell you, I'm not a sociologist, but when you get rid of high expectations, things kind of go pot. And then when you don't have discipline, as you well know, and being in the military, that's a key component.
Yep.
As long as that's fair. And yeah, I wouldn't last 5 minutes in the teaching room today.
One of the leadership principles in the Marine Corps is seek responsibility and take responsibility for your actions. And that's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a tough ask. And if you're in an uncertain position, like being a young officer where you don't really know your job very well, you're trying to figure it out.
What limits?
There's a lot of fear there, and you don't want to get in trouble. So to seek responsibility is already a huge ask, right? To actually go out and look for it and then try and take responsibility for something. That's a big ask. So you get somebody who can do that, and then they're going to fail. They're going to make mistakes, whether it's intentionally or not. Like there's going to be things that go wrong. Then you get into the second portion of that, and it's take responsibility for your actions. If you can find a person who can do that, boy, they're incredible, and it's so empowering. But you need that discipline portion, because taking responsibility for your actions is meaningless unless sometimes there's pain involved in doing so.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing glorious about taking responsibility for a mistake that you made or something that you intentionally did wrong if there's no consequence for it.
Right, yeah. That's a good point.
But what subjects did you teach?
Biology and forestry and advanced biology.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had the second forestry program in the state of Oregon.
Okay.
Because I was graduating Fish and Game, and so that was and then here I was immersed in the forest of Wallowa County and loving outdoors, so I thought, hey, I'm going to start teaching the kid about fisheries, about soil, grass, trees, forestry. Yeah. And then I got a job working in the woods so I could learn more. Mm-hmm. I was a timber faller for 19 summers, and that added to my knowledge base. And then I gradually shifted the class towards forestry because that's where the jobs were.
Yep.
And I had Green Hill, which is right behind Wallowa, 36 acres, and I leased that from Boise Cascade for $1 for 20 years.
Wow.
And then that was my outdoor project.
Okay.
And I could walk up there
For the school.
for this school, my forestry class. And then Leroy Childers and Dave Smith, my bosses, were really, really flexible. They gave me all kinds of time. Sometimes if I needed a day off to go log up there, they'd let me take off and have the whole day up there with my forestry kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up making $69,000 off that hill by selling the timber back to Boise Cascade.
Nice.
And the kids did all the timber falling, marking, limbing, bucking. I didn't, and then I would get Bauks, Larry Bauk, and to do the skidding for me. And then the fathers would haul the logs for free to the mill.
So you had high school kids up there running chainsaws, felling trees.
Oh yeah, girls and boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I told the girls, I said, hey, I hate to say this, but 50% of you are going to get divorced.
Yeah.
You ought to know how to get your own firewood, and you want to do it safe.
Yeah.
And they loved it. Yeah.
Well, when I pulled up to the parking lot here before I walked in the building, I just got a notification from my dad. Of course, he was a logger, timber feller, was a really good sawyer, and then he worked in the Boise Cascade Mill. That's where he was working when I was born, I think, or he started working there right afterwards. At that time, there were 69 mills in Eastern Oregon. Today, there's 7.
Yeah.
Well, he just got a bill passed that is going to make it so that you can go over to OSU and take a 1-day class on grading lumber, and then a small sawmill can then make dimensional lumber and grade it and use it in single-family or duplex homes now.
I'll be darned.
Which I think is just huge for economic development and sustainable use of our natural resources throughout Oregon, but definitely in Eastern Oregon, is now somebody with a small sawmill can be making dimensional lumber for the local construction crews, and we're not having to truck that stuff in from Canada
keep it right at home.
and we can start improving the health of our forest.
He ran for the legislature.
Yep, he's a state senator now.
Right.
Yep.
Because I saw his poster, and was it Ted Dash?
Todd.
Yeah. Todd. Well, I got a T in there.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever meeting him, but I read a lot about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
I'm proud of him for getting that one across the line, though. I think that's awesome.
A goal-getter.
We haven't had much positive in the way of timber management happen in a long time. The Wallowa Whitman has more natural mortality in its forest right now than it does growth. And it doesn't you don't have to know anything about trees. And if you see that, then you know you've got a problem. Like you're running your budget at a deficit. If you have more of it dying than you have of it growing, there's only one way that ends up.
I've noticed that for years on the north side of the Wallowas.
Yeah.
As opposed to, which is odd, more moisture, as opposed to the east side. I mean, the south side. Yeah. Because I lived in Richland for years, and I'm a log wood cutting fiend, and I'd go out there and I'm looking for dead trees. I can't find any. And I'm thinking, Wallowa County, Lost Cane River, I cut so much Doug fir up there, beetle killed and larch and so on and so forth for years before they did any management.
Yeah.
And I kept noticing because I taught forestry, and I thought, why are all those trees? The only thing I can think of is stress from drought. But why wasn't it happening on the other side?
And crowding, right?
Yeah.
Those trees are competing with each other.
Oh, yeah.
It's a situation where they're all trying to make it through that gate at the beginning of the race, and
that's a good analogy.
Not all of them make it,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're crowding each other out, and tough deal. Well, the other thing that I've heard about you, Dale, is that you were an absolute assassin in the Eagle Caps hunting deer.
Oh, well, elk. I hunted elk but both of them. Well, I was pretty strong, and so I could hike those hills pretty good. And of course, I lived up the Lost Canyon, Bear Creek. Yeah. And I could go to the top of that mountain pretty quick. But of course, when you're bow hunting, speed is not. You're going for stealth, and but being in shape helped, because if I went up one side of the Lost Canyon, I'd glass across, and if I saw a herd of elk over there, I'd down the bottom and up the top, or up halfway or third. Then I could hone in on trying to stalk that herd.
So what year did you start bow hunting elk?
I started in 1961. 62 or 63.
So that's a recurve.
Yeah, I never shot anything but a recurve.
You only ever shot a recurve.
I wouldn't touch a compound.
Okay.
And it was funny because I started, now am I going too long here?
You're doing great.
I started out, my buddies was hunting, and I didn't know how to hold the string. I used to go like that, which is ridiculous.
Just pinching it with your
yeah,
thumb.
Yeah, and you get a heavy bow, you can't hold it. So I started shooting, and he said, let's go hunting for Roosevelt over on the coast. So I did, and I shot every day for about an hour and a half every day.
Mm-hmm.
Went over there, and the first elk that I shot an arrow at was a spiked bull. He was just getting ready to go into the timber, and I paced it off. It was 43 yards, something like that. And I had to elevate to get through a little Doug fir branch. Wasn't a very big branch. And to this day, I don't know, was I off and the branch corrected my arrow, or did the branch not interfere with my arrow? I'll never know the answer to that. That animal turned around to look at me, and I was shooting for his neck in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Bam, he just dropped to the ground. I ran up there, and he couldn't move, couldn't get up. I had shot him 1 inch above the foramen magnum in the brain and went 5 inches in the brain.
You headshot an elk
Well,
through the
not on
brush at
purpose.
44 yards with a recurve?
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, I was pulling for his neck, so I shot a little bit high, but, the flat surface behind the head, just 1 inch above the foramen magnum, and of course it missed the medulla oblongata. And I told my buddies later, I said, "Damn it, I missed the medulla oblongata." like you could hit that? I don't think so. And so anyway, that was my first elk, and I saved the skull for years. But that was purely a quirk or accidental. But that, boy, I'll tell you, that got me the bug.
What would that have been, a wooden arrow?
Oh yeah, I made all my own arrows, wood.
Okay, and what broadhead were you shooting?
Zwicky.
Zwickies.
Black diamond.
Okay.
Black diamond Zwickies.
Yeah.
You could put those. Well, actually, the very first arrow was a bear.
Okay.
Was a bear, a Fred Bear arrow. Because then I graduated to the Zwickies a couple of years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those Zwickies are pretty mild steel, but if you've got a practiced hand, you can get them mighty sharp.
I would set them in a vise and just meticulously get them really, really sharp. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not as good as the razor blades they use today with the inserts, but they work fine for me.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you started, did you ever call elk, or when did you see?
I tried it one time.
Okay. When did that kind of come onto the scene in this part of the country?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I don't know exactly, but I got into it a little bit late, and I only did it one time. The bull came at me, and I immediately, when I bugled, I moved immediately 20 yards to my right, so that he would not know where I was.
Yep.
Well, he came right on top of me, and he was like 11 feet, and I went for a shot in the shoulder, but I hit bone, and he took off. And I didn't like that because I want a broadside shot that I can get to when I stalk. And I watched his behavior. It was just a little red spot. The arrow stayed in him, but I could tell by a movement I had hit a bone. And excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. And the next day I saw him and bugled. Boy, he went up the hill. He just left. So I knew I didn't kill him. I knew that and I just gave it up then. I said, I'm not doing that anymore. Which is kind of a mistake.
Done with calling at that point.
At that point, I like to just go in, listen to them, try to find them, and then when you could smell them too. And you could see them, you could smell them, and you could hear them. I just got to work a little harder. But I had that country in my backyard.
Yeah.
I mean, there was elk all over the place back in those days.
So how do you balance using vegetation versus terrain for your approach and stalking within close distance for a recurve?
Well, that country inherently is brushy because I would hunt those snow slides, and they're always, the conifers are pretty hard to get established, and the alders and the willows come in, and so that gives me that cover that I need, and that's where the elk are often feeding.
Yep.
Browsing on that. So I would glass those in particular, as opposed to the deep, dark timber that, I'm not going to get on them there as well.
Okay.
So I always hunted those slides.
So you like the avalanche shoots? And then, teach me more about how to sneak up on a herd of elk, because that's not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of eyes, a lot of ears, a lot of noses.
That's the hard part. And you just got to go slow and look here, there. And a lot of times, most of all the time, I would take, I'm hunting shoes, and I would take them off and go in the final couple hundred yards barefooted. And that's the hard part. One time I was able to slip into a herd up the Lost Canyon, shoot a bull, was a spike, out of the herd, and he escaped, and the rest of the herd stayed there and fed. Didn't run. And I thought, oh, that's neat, because I didn't disturb the herd, you know. That was kind of an ego trip. But yeah, you got to watch everything. You got to just go slow and watch for those eyes, because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And I just remember when I hunted, I remember reading an article where the African lion makes a kill about 1 out of 5 stalks.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, if I do that, he's got claws and teeth, and he's faster, stronger. And if I do that even less frequently, then I'm doing okay, because he's a damn good hunter.
Yeah.
So I used that in my. If I got discouraged, I thought, hey, a lion, he misses. So you got to miss, so let's go. So I was real conservative in my shots. I wouldn't take a shot unless I knew I could get it.
Yeah.
And I kept records of all my shots. I have them in my storage unit here. The distance, the time, the place, where I hit them, because I wanted that history for my.
Yeah.
When I got old, I could read back, but I got a lot of them memorized too.
So what do you recall from that? What is the most common shot distance do you think you were dealing with?
Well, it was about 23 yards.
That's so interesting.
I had one of them. My closest one was 12 feet.
Yeah.
But that was accident. He came to me. I didn't come to him.
Yeah.
But stalking. Well, if you got good cover, and I painted up and all that, but. If you got good cover and you're slow, and the wind is always in your favor. And the Lost Canyon was fairly predictable with the down drafts and early in the morning cold air sinking in. So I used that to my benefit. But I never did count how many stalks I made as to opposed how many kills I made.
Yeah.
I just...
I didn't interview, but I took data points on 600 successful elk shots.
Wow.
This
600?
This was 2016 or 2017 that I did this. So I would talk to people on Facebook groups and at trade shows and everywhere that I could, and I would have them give me their last 3 elk that they'd shot and recovered. And then I averaged all that out. The average of those 600 data points.
Rifle.
Archery.
Oh, archery. Okay.
The average of those 600 data points was 23 yards.
Oh, really? I'll be darned.
Was 23 yards.
I'll be darned. Well,
there's something very, very special about that distance in archery elk hunting.
I'll be darned.
And in my own personal experience in guiding, which, is 150 elk or something at this point, maybe more than that, that's still very consistent. So if you want a successful archery shot, that's what your goal should be, is 23 yards. I also see a decrease once you get closer in success. So my most commonly missed distance for my clients is 18 yards. So I start to see a lot of misses as we get closer, and then over 28 yards, I start to see the misses increase again. But at 23 yards, that is a very, very dead elk most of the time. And I see a lot of people practicing, especially with compounds, at really long distances, and they like to practice at distances where the arrow time of flight is long. There's plenty of time for the animal to move. It's a distance where our eyes simply can't see small limbs that might be in the way.
Yeah.
And what I tell people is to do practice shooting your bow, be competent, be strong with it, but you might need to spend some time practicing other things like walking quietly.
Right.
Actually spend time doing that, because this is the most common situation that you're going to run into is a 23-yard shot, which just doesn't take that much shooting skill, especially with a compound, to shoot well with. I can teach most people how to do that in an afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, that's ironic.
Yeah.
That's good. So now you know I'm not a BSer.
Well, I'm not too sure about that yet, Dale. We'll see. We'll see as it goes on here.
Since I absolutely despise BSers and bullshitters. Excuse the terminology. But I would get a kill and I would immediately, I'd pace it off sometimes before I gutted it.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I'd pace it off 2 or 3 times just to make sure I had everything, and then I would memorize it and write it down that night. So I have all those records, and
that's super interesting.
It was fun.
What are some other lessons that you learned in your years hunting archery elk that you think maybe might be lost today?
Oh, I wouldn't say I have anything that would be above anybody else that would lose anything. They got to be a lot smarter than I am. I mean, just what you told me, that beats anything I've done. I mean, when you took the records of all those.
Yeah, those are just data points, though. That's not actually a skill transfer.
Well, man, that's a tough one.
Like if you could go back to the 1961 Dale and give him some elk hunting advice, what would you tell him?
I'm trying to think of that. But like I said, just go slow. Know your country. Know your area.
Yeah.
Know where the elk habitat is, and
how do you learn that?
Well, just go in and experience it and read everything you did. I used to read quite a bit and listen to other people. Anybody had any information, and then I just learned by doing because I was always out in the woods. And then I'd make mistakes, but I get into areas. I particularly like areas like basins, that were moist and wet, had green hellebore in it, and that western coneflower that had some moisture because that would be good for my stalking, and it'd be real quiet. And some of those valleys up in the high Wallowa. Have you ever been in the McCubbin Basin? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Goat Mountain, Huckleberry, Goat Mountain, McCubbin Basin.
The elk are about run out of it anymore.
Is that right?
Yeah. The wolves got after them real hard in that country, but a lot of what you got to experience, it's changed. It's changed a lot. So, for example, now you might spend the entire 10-day rifle season for deer in the eagle caps right now and not see a single deer. Like not a doe, not a buck, like not see a deer, and that's glassing all day long in the good country. I
began to see that on the south side because I lived over there in Richland, so I hunted up the eagle cap. I mean the Eagle Fork, Boulder Creek, and then I would go up into the headwaters of the Minam, hunt on the south side, and every year it got worse and worse and worse. And I'm hunting with a rifle at that time. And if I could go up there and kill a 4-point first day, no problem. Then pretty soon it took 2 days and then 5 days. And I wasn't getting older and I wasn't blind. It's just that deer weren't there.
And when did that start changing?
That was in the 1990s, late 90s.
So after we
2000.
After we banned hunting cougars with dogs.
Probably had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I remember once on the backside of Ruby Peak. That's not Lake Creek.
Silver Creek.
Silver Creek. Thank you. Little memory. Okay, I was up there, and I counted 13 bucks. Opening day of deer season, walking up on the south side of Ruby Peak, going uphill. Last one was a forked horn. First ones are 4 and 5 points.
Yeah.
And I counted them. And I thought, I never in my life had seen that many bucks.
So, the Scotch Creek saddle on the side of Ruby Peak, like main thoroughfare for game to...
I was right there. It's almost where I was when I saw him, yeah.
Yeah, I figured. I hung a game camera in there last August, or last July, actually, and ran it until December is when the snow covered it up. In that time, there was one deer that went through that saddle.
You're kidding me.
In those months. And I would see bighorn sheep almost every day.
Yeah.
But there was one single solitary buck that walked through that saddle and no does.
And you think it's all wolves, huh?
No, I think it's a number of things. But I think that the wolves and cougars have played a significant role. And I think that there's still tremendous habitat in there.
Yeah.
Like it's still very, very good deer habitat. But unless you can have does that have fawns that survive
Yeah.
up in those basins, then there aren't deer that know to migrate back there. So it's just vacant.
Because when I first started hunting huckleberry was 1966, and the sheep bands. There was 2 bands of sheep up there.
Yep.
And I would stop and talk to the sheep herders. And one of my students, Billy Courtney, ended up sheep herding up there. And that grass, and you know the grass up there is pretty interesting. That grass would be nibbled down like that and be sheep crap all over the place. And yet every one of those basins would have beautiful bucks in it.
Yeah.
And we would go, we were archery hunting, and they would be from 1 to 3 bucks in every one of those basins. And we just go along and glass down from the top, you know, the cirques that are, and pick our buck. And then gradually that began to disappear. And back in those days, you could get 2 deer. You get a high Wallowa mountain tag for $5, and then your regular deer tag.
Yeah.
And then I think it was after 1969, we had a real good hunter success, and then we had a heavy snow.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the numbers the next year were pretty low, and then it just seemed to go down below. And I kept talking to Vic Coggins. You know, Vic and I went to school together.
Yep.
I think you interviewed him, didn't you?
Yeah. Vic's been on the show. We're going to have him back here pretty soon to talk about sheep.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's... Yeah, he and I were graduating fishing game together.
Okay.
And then I came to teach, and he came to do fishing game. And, but the deer numbers never seemed to come up. But then I'm not doing a quantitative study, but the elk numbers seem to go up. So I kept thinking maybe there's some competition there. And obviously they...
Well, there certainly is. I've heard that an elk takes up the niche of about 6 deer.
Have you?
Which makes sense. They're about 6 times bigger.
Yeah.
And I know that's a linear scale, and that almost nothing scales linearly in nature.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
That is the number that I've heard thrown around there. So, well, besides being incredibly fast, besides having such a positive and meaningful impact on so many students for over 3 decades in Wallowa County, you know, all your work in forestry and your accomplishments as a hunter, what else do you think is your legacy? How else do you want people to remember you?
Well, some people would hate me because I was working with Vic Coggins and a bunch of the other guys there in town, Ron Bartels, on the Hells Canyon Preservation Council back in the 70s to stop dams on Hells Canyon. Mm-hmm. And I was really into that. I was a president of the local chapter and went back to Washington, D.C., gave up 3 days of teaching, testified in front of them, and then we finally got legislation passed. And I worked on that for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And that was a good feeling. Although I was assumed that we could get the law passed and then we could sit back and relax and it'd be done. It don't work that way.
Yeah.
You have to keep fighting and fighting and fighting.
That's
over
true.
and over and over.
Yeah.
Look at the Indians. You know, they got beat up and kicked out, and it never ends for them.
No. The fight never ends when you have 2 competing interests over a natural resource.
Yeah.
Well, I was up in Hells Canyon last week. It's still my favorite place in the world. I was up there hunting bears and turkeys and fishing, and took my jet boat way upriver there. And every time I come back downriver, I look up and can see that white mark where the Mountain Sheep Dam was going to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so glad that there isn't one there.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's just an incredible piece of this earth that would have been buried underwater, and it would have just been another dam.
Oh, yeah.
Another dam.
When I was working there, they had 99 dams on the Columbia River system. That's all the tributaries.
Yeah.
And I said to them in my arguments, I said, how many do you have to have? Do you have to dam every? And I said, if you have made a mistake, meaning them, and then dam it, how are you going to get that dam out of there? But if we made the mistake, you can always add the dam later. And what about something for our kids and our grandkids to manage?
Right.
If you indeed think you can manage nature better than it can itself, but of course the dollar bill enters the equation, and luckily we got that accidentally involved or passed when Wilbur Mills was if I got the name right, was the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And he was big drinker. And he was drinking and ran off the road with the Argentine Firecracker, a local stripper in Washington, D.C. No, it was a blessing.
Okay.
It was a blessing.
Okay.
And he drove off into one of those little shallow ponds.
Okay.
And they got him and they kicked him out. Guess who was second in line to take his place? Al Ullman from Baker City
Okay.
was the representative.
All right.
And Al Ullman became the chief of the Ways and Means Committee, which is the dollars, the bucks. We got him on our side, and he was. And then, of course, we were working with Bob Packwood, and we got, and Frank Church obviously was a big factor from the Idaho side. And things moved fast as soon as we got him on there because we didn't have any obstacles, and we were able to get legislation. I think that was 1973.
Yeah. Did you know Frank?
Oh, I met him several times.
Yeah.
Great guy.
What was he like?
Oh, just an old cowboy with. I remember going to his office and he'd lean back and put his boots up on top of his tape. He wore cowboy boots, and he'd put them up on top of his desk and offer us a drink. And Bob Packwood was the same way.
Huh.
Packwood drank a lot of beer. But it was interesting because it was my first exposure to quote democracy.
Yeah.
And it was a little lopsided.
It's a little bit different than the way it gets taught in high school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You could see it. I kept track of the time when I was giving my testimony. I was one of two or three people that gave the testimony off the top of their head. I didn't need notes. I had it all up here. And they interrupted me 3 times. And I was very quiet, very calm. I didn't get, very respectful because I knew how to present. And the other side it was run by Alan Bible, was a senator from Nevada. He wanted to build the dams so they could back water up and irrigate Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And we were against that. He gave them twice as much time to testify as we got.
Sure.
And so I thought, this is not really an equal deal.
Yeah.
But that's the way it works.
Well, I was over in Salem testifying on some mule deer issues and stuff, and I'd met with these senators the day before, and I said, look, I know there's going to be a lot of people testifying. Time's going to be short. Should I leave time for any questions? And one of them had said, yes, absolutely. There's a question in mind that I want to ask you that will be part of the public record. I was like, great. So I had 90 seconds. I spoke for 60 seconds, and I said, I'll yield the rest of my time if any of you have any questions. And the chair of the committee just said, thanks for your testimony. Next.
Is that right?
I was like, I had traveled all the way from South Carolina to Salem, Oregon to be there for that, and got 60 seconds to try to advocate.
And that was
for
the
deer.
State legislature.
Yeah.
Not federal.
Yeah.
I'll be damned.
But,
wow.
You still got to do it. You still got to do it
yeah.
because if you don't, then somebody else is going to say the other thing.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you got to show up. Dale, I just can't thank you enough for your stories. Really appreciate you. This has been a fun conversation.
Just because my name is Story, keep in mind I did not make these stories up.
All
These
right.
are all true.
Yeah.
And authentic. It's a real pleasure to meet you, James. And I
Thank you,
just
sir.
really admire you.
Appreciate it a
for
lot.
your background and the service in the military. I never was in the military, but because Vietnam was going on, I was in college, so I was 1A, but never called me.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad I didn't have to go, but
Well,
it's a deal. Well, listen, great. Thank you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed this a lot more than you would imagine, and I don't know if it's an ego trip. One of my buddies wrote a biography on me, and I said, well, why you do that? He says, because a lot of young kids out there look up to you, and you might change their direction in life. And I thought, that makes sense, because that's what my old coach told me when I was 17, 18 years old.
yeah. And you might never know it because people are going to listen to this all over the world.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that you are going to change somebody's life.
You're not going to let the FBI listen to this, are you?
Oh, they listen to everything I do.
All right. Thanks a million.
All right. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy lives to write a review for the show and share it with their friends. I'm extremely proud of how intelligent, engaged, and adventurous this audience is. Original music for the Six Ranch podcast is written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Shadowin and digitized by Celia Harlander. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.